Hello, I'm Steve Sokol, the president of the American Council on Germany. Each week, we check in with a Berlin-based journalist to talk about the emerging stories and the breaking news. Today, I'm joined by Jens Wiegmann, who served as foreign editor of Die Welt and WELT am Sonntag since 2005. Jens, herzlich willkommen.
Hi, Steve. Nice being here.
It is great to see you again. We had a chance to see each other in person in the middle of June. And of course, since then, there has been a lot of shuttle diplomacy, if you will, or a lot of traveling diplomacy. We've seen a 6-day summit marathon of Western allies during the last few days of June, beginning with the EU summit in Brussels, followed immediately by the G7 summit in the Bavarian Alps and the NATO summit in Madrid, Spain. At these meetings, the Western allies were concerned with demonstrating that the state and government succeeded in doing that. Even Turkey acquiesced and agreed to Sweden's and Finland's NATO membership, giving it to North NATO member states.
So since Steve is having some technical difficulties, I thought I might jump in. Good morning. I'm Rada, Program Director for the ACG. I'm not 100% sure where Steve was going with his thoughts.
No, I think he made the introduction. I understood like parts of it, but I think I know where he wants me to go, and maybe I can take over here.
Please do.
When he's back, he'll yeah. I mean, he mentioned the summit marathon, and that was really quite impressive. I mean, we had the EU summit in Brussels, and that in itself was quite spectacular, you could say, because you know, they've been talking about enlargement of the EU and talking about Ukraine. And if you remember, this was how it all began on the Maidan, because that was actually the first reason for upheaval in the Ukraine. They didn't want to join NATO, they wanted to join the European Union. And this is how the Maidan began, and this is how this unfolded. And now in Brussels on the EU summit, they agreed to accept Ukraine and Moldova as candidates. This was, many people say this was merely symbolic. Again, we've been talking about this step for 8 years at least. And you know from other candidates that it can take a very, very long time from being a candidate to being a member of the EU. And immediately there was a lot of criticism. You know, what about corruption in Ukraine? And the core question, can we accept a country as a candidate who is at war? Or in the case of Moldova, can we accept a country where Russian soldiers are stationed, in this case in Transnistria, the separatist little exclave. And so, but again, this was received well in general. And then just shortly after was the G7 summit in Bavaria on Schloss Elmau. That was 7 years after Angela Merkel was a host there. And Barack Obama was there, and you might remember the pictures where the two were really relaxed, sitting on a bench, looking at the Alpine scene and chatting away, and obviously understanding each other really well. This was like a little test for Olaf Scholz, because this was the first time he really was very prominent on the international stage. He was the host, and certainly he was compared to Angela Merkel and the last summit. Some people say there were a little too many pictures. I mean, it was him walking through the grass, and it was all a big dramatization to really show how harmonic everything is, and how people you know, get to talk. And but overall this too was received pretty well. And then just shortly after that was the NATO Summit in Brussels. And again, even before it started, on the eve, they announced that they had an agreement with Turkey, that Erdogan and Andersson and Niinistö from Sweden and Finland, the prime minister and the president, were talking on the eve of the summit. And as you all remember, Erdogan said, he could not agree accepting those two as members of NATO, because he wanted them to be harsher on what he calls terrorists and the PKK and YPG. And so, but they seemed to agree, and the summit started with the announcement. And as you said, Steve, this morning it was officially signed that they want to start the process of Sweden and Finland joining. I mean, this is amazing. I think Sweden had like 200 years of independence, and we talked about Finlandization, about Finland as a synonym for being neutral and trying to stay out of it, being at the having a 1,300 kilometer border with Russia. So this was really amazing that they applied for NATO. So for Germany, again, obviously, I said the being a host in Schloss Elmau was very important. The reactions were good. I mean, maybe a little like anecdote. I don't know if you heard about it. The press conference didn't went too well for Olaf Scholz, the chancellor. He's been criticized for being a kind of arrogant or rude or harsh, whatever you call it. Some people say that's because he's from Hamburg, he's from northern Germany. I'm so too. I wouldn't call myself rude, but I'm not a chancellor. But there was one question from a journalist about the security guarantees for Ukraine. The heads of states obviously had talked about, and she asked, so could you tell us something about those guarantees? And then he answered, yes, I could. Nothing happened. She was kind of confused, everybody was, and he said, that's it. And they were still talking about it, and there was actually this little snippet from WELT TV, where the journalist is asking, somebody took this and made it like a little a movie out of it, and the headline was "Siri, define arrogance." So that was actually not very good public relations for Olaf Scholz. But he has problems with communication. That's what many people say. With the EU summit, nobody expected anything else but Germany supporting Ukraine becoming a member. What's interesting, maybe, because before the EU summit, there was also for one day the West Balkans summit. And here, certainly, it's about EU enlargement, and we have those candidates there. We have North Macedonia and Albania and Montenegro. And actually Scholz, supported those countries to become candidates or soon members of the EU as well. This has been topic of discussion for many years, because the problem is also a lot of corruption. Albania is said to have a very big cannabis production, and many of these countries being very corrupt. And also, as you know, we've had some problems in the EU with countries that are members but are have a tendency to autocracy. I mean, you look at Hungary, and you look at Poland, and actually Bulgaria. after Greece admitted, said, okay, I can live with North Macedonia as a candidate, now Bulgaria is blocking it. So, and that's why the West Balkans were, kept at distance for quite some time, because, once they are members of the EU, we'll have a lot of problems if we don't solve all those problems there. Actually, some of them, mainly Serbia, is openly pro-Russian. The Serbian papers actually had the headlines when the war started in February. They had the headlines, Ukraine attacked Russia. And they are openly pro-Russia. Vucic just announced a big deal, a gas deal with Russia. And he said, wow, that's best deal ever, a very cheap gas now. And we are really happy. And there have even been reports that Serbia tries to destabilize its neighbor, Montenegro, because they are pro-West. So this is a very difficult area. Nonetheless, Scholz said we should, ask them to join the EU, to try to, make them immune or strengthen them against Russian influence. In my impression, it's almost too late, and they've been, kept at distance for many, many years, and I don't know if this still works. With the G7, I think the problem is that Germany's economy. Just by the numbers, Germany is the 4th largest economy in the world. Certainly, the world looks to Germany, and I'm sure the American administration does, that Germany and the German economy provide some stability for the international markets and the international economy. But just yesterday, I think a number came out that for the first time since 1991, the German trade balance is negative. That's certainly because of Russia and sanctions, and also China, which is a topic in itself. But yeah, this is quite some problem, because exports are extremely important for Germany, and the first time since 1991, that doesn't sound very good. What many people still don't understand, many governments don't understand, is how the Energiewende is supposed to work. I think the end of this year, the last nuclear power plants are getting off the grid, and more coal plants are getting out of service. At the same time, Germany has problems establishing more renewable energies. There's discussions about wind energy and where to put the generators, the turbines. There's all kinds of talks about, how to increase renewable energies. And I think one thing is for sure, they are not big enough to replace fossil fuels. And now, as you all know, we have a problem with Russian gas. What really drives people mad, or what people don't understand, is that this has been obvious for such a long time. And we all remember the American warnings, the American, they insisted on stopping Nord Stream 2. And then Biden refrained from that because he knew how important Germany is, and he wouldn't put too much pressure on Germany. But certainly, almost everybody was against Nord Stream 2. I mean, the Eastern Europeans anyway, Poland, Ukraine, and everybody said, this is dangerous to build this pipeline around all the Eastern European countries, straightly to Germany, and you're getting in a dangerous dependence. And this is what happens. And I think Nord Stream 1 is down to 40% now. And now there's a kind of panic. We have a 3-step plan, emergency plan for gas. I think we're in phase 2 now. So there might be some restrictions in the winter. and we're hectically trying to get some gas from Qatar. Some people say they are not much better than Russia when you talk about human rights and things like that. I just read that the British, who've been exporting gas to continental Europe, are thinking twice because they need it themselves, or maybe they want to get a better price. So, and Norway is not very happy either, because they export a lot to Germany, very much more than they want to. They are producing much more than they want to. So we're in quite a dilemma, and I don't really see a solution for that. And winter will be really interesting. The gas prices at the pump stations have been subsidized recently because they went up pretty high. I don't know the comparison to the gallon, but I mean, our prices are much higher anyway, way higher than in the US. And they really came down visibly. So that's the good thing. But we'll see how long the government can do that to subsidize the gas price. One more thing that was interesting about the G7, that they announced an infrastructure plan to conquer the Road and Belt initiative from China. It's worth $600 billion. But we have to see how it works, if it works. I mean, we've had announcements like this from the European Union. It didn't get very far. Again, if you look at the Balkans, the Chinese are already there. They're already building roads in Montenegro and those poor countries. So we'll see if this wasn't too little and too late. And maybe talking about the G7, one more interesting thing, and that also highlights the problems of German foreign policy of the last years, because BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and for most of the time, this was an acronym that was mostly important for investors or for the financial world. But China now wants to expand that, and they want to turn it into a bloc to conquer or outweigh the G7. They asked Argentina to join, and they asked Indonesia to join. And I've looked at it and I thought, okay, what's German foreign policy towards Argentina and Indonesia? And they weren't taken seriously. That's my impression. So I think this, it's like, that's the price we have to pay now. Another thing, what really shocked many people, for example, is India. India, I think, as well as South Africa, did not join the resolution against the Russian war in Ukraine. They were not siding with Russia, but they were not siding with the West either. And there are many people who say, we talked about India as the world's largest democracy, and some people would say that this is not true anymore. They are still large, but they are not a real democracy anymore. And they have no problem, Indonesia as well as India, with importing Russian oil and gas and making up for the sanctions the West put on them. Last look, NATO. Again, quite spectacular, not only because of the of Sweden and Finland, but also because there's a new strategy. Russia was declared the most dangerous, I don't know if they call it enemy, but Russia is considered a threat to the West, to NATO. So that's a change, and the NATO refrained from stationing larger troops continuously in Eastern European countries. that stops. Now they're going to put some troops there. The Americans, as you all know, are putting more troops into Europe. I think Germany, also Poland, they are building a new headquarter in Poland. And there will also be permanent NATO troops or troops by NATO members in the Eastern European countries, also in Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia. They are very nervous. And so they also want to expand the NATO response force from, I think, 40,000 to about 300,000. But this, especially for Germany, is quite a problem. Germany is sure to send some 15,000 troops into this force, but many people are asking, how are you going to do that? And the second question is, what are the weapons you're taking with you? Because if one thing was really eye-opening about the Ukraine war is the situation in the German Bundeswehr. For quite some time, you couldn't know if the lack of support or the little numbers of weapons being sent to Ukraine is because of hesitation, or if these weapons really don't exist in the numbers needed. I think it's a mixture of both. And from my perspective, there is quite some hesitation to send larger weapons. We at WELT had several articles about it. We're in close contact with the government in Ukraine, checking on all those announcements and promises Berlin made. And in many, many cases, they promised certain heavy weapons. And if we asked Kiev, they said nothing ever got here. And then when the government or Secretary of Defense Lambrecht was asked, she said, oh, that's for security reasons, I can't tell you. And so this went on for quite some time. But one thing definitely is obvious, that there are not enough tanks and modern systems and planes and whatever you call it, helicopters at the Bundeswehr. And people are wondering how Germany will fulfill its promises to NATO if they don't have enough. I can't see Steve anymore.
I guess we've lost Steve again.
What is he doing here?
Steve is he's on vacation at the moment. So
okay.
Using the hotel Wi-Fi is not always the best option. But to jump in, as you're talking about NATO and this unity, to sign this agreement against Russia and naming them as an enemy, how sincere is this commitment between the NATO members? Is once this war is over, will there still be this strong alignment?
That's a good question. I think the unity is pretty good, because I mean one reason why people question NATO and the future of NATO, like before the war, is because there was what's the reason for NATO to exist, and so I mean the reason now is very obvious, and it's visible. It's actually pretty close. I mean, from Berlin, it's only a few hundred kilometers to the war. And as I said in the beginning, I mean, if you look at Sweden and Finland, they are not really big countries. But first of all, they've been neutral for so many years, for such a long time. So to make this step is really amazing. That is a commitment. And I don't think it's short time, because if they do it, and they've been talking in society, in politics, there have been polls. I mean, they've been talking about it before, but the signal was pretty strong coming out of those countries. I mean, you have to remember that in Sweden, we have the so-called Sweden Democrats. This is like the AfD in Germany. This is like really right-wing. And those guys usually are pro-Putin. And even these guys in parliament were in favor of Sweden joining NATO. So this is a wide consensus. And so I think you can really take this as a very strong commitment. And second, from a geopolitical and military point of view, this is really great for NATO. I mean, geopolitical, it's quite obvious. I mean, NATO wasn't very strong in the north. The three Baltic countries are very vulnerable and very exposed. Finland has 1,300 kilometers of border with Russia, so this makes a big difference. And second, they have a strong military, they have high investment in their military, and they have been incorporated in NATO for many years. So they've been part of maneuvers. So it'll be quite easy to incorporate them into NATO and make them to functioning members very soon. So, but to come back to your question, I think the biggest question mark is behind Germany. And this is not only for the reasons I just mentioned, that the military is in a terrible state, but there's been a lot of trust lost, and especially again in Eastern Europe. The relationship between Germany and Poland is really, really bad. There have been some polls recently, and it's going both ways. But the polls, and we're not talking about the PIS government, we're talking about the people. They are really don't expect much from Germany. They follow very closely this whole issue of sending weapons or not sending weapons to Ukraine. And Poland is one of the strongest supporters of Ukraine. And they also took in, I think, 1.5 million refugees. So they're doing an incredible job. And they really don't understand why Germany doesn't. This is also for the Baltic states. They are usually very polite. They, you know, when are on these summits, they don't stand up and criticize Germany. But from what I've heard, they are also not happy at all with Germany. They are not sure if Germany would help them if needed. So yeah, this is, and I don't know what I mean, certainly you know better than I do what the situation in the US is. I mean, the US probably wants to rely on a strong Germany as part of NATO and playing its part in NATO and being close to Russia. And I assume that the Biden administration isn't very happy either with. So
the three summits, the G7, the EU summit, NATO, we saw unity against Russia. But what about the other elephant in the room, China? Is there still the same unity in that regard?
Again, the problem is Germany. Because Germany has very, very close trade relations with China. I think for some German car makers, it's the largest market. Volkswagen has been producing there for decades, and all I think Porsche is there, and they are. The Chinese market is very important. It's a very important export market for us, but we also certainly import a lot from China. And again, this has been a topic for many, many years, also when Merkel was chancellor. And Germany really never criticized China. Okay, they invited the Dalai Lama once, but that was about it. And yeah, China is a very big problem. And there actually just recently was the head of, I think, Volkswagen, who said, we shouldn't, be too tough on China because we need them. So I'm not sure how other countries look at it. I don't know what the relationship or the trade relationship of other countries with China is. I'm sure they all have very close relationships, but for Germany, China is very important, so they are very careful. And I don't know how far the unity goes. I mean, this is if we have no gas from Russia and we have lose China as an export market, that's probably not very good for the German economy.
So you talked a bit about the shortcomings of the Bundeswehr. What does the summit mean for Germany, the Bundeswehr? Will there be long, short-term, mid-term consequences?
One discussion that came up with was a draft, because Germany got rid of the draft. Oh, I forgot I think like 10 years ago, 12 years ago, something like that. And so some people said, oh, we need the draft again. We need we can't rely on a professional Bundeswehr anymore. I don't know, and I think most experts wouldn't agree with that. That's not the point. But all parts of the military, the army and the Navy and the Air Force have huge problems. Again, this was known for quite some time, and I think the government, starting under Merkel, but also now, they just expected that this could go on for quite some time. So a lot has to change. This will take quite some time, because you cannot just buy some new weapons, some new planes, some new ships. What we need is a different attitude, I think, also in society. We have to accept that we need the Bundeswehr, and that if we need it, it has to work. It has to be equipped in a sufficient way. And so we have to talk about it. I mean, it was almost like a taboo topic. I mean, specialists talked about it. They knew about all these problems, but nobody really wanted to hear about it, let alone do something about it. And now we have to change that. My problem is, or not my problem, but maybe the problem of the country, that the Secretary of Defense doesn't give the impression that she wants to change that. She made all kinds of announcements, as I said in the beginning, of sending weapons to Ukraine, of doing this and that. And if you look at the latest, I'm not sure if it was an internal statement, but it was a reaction to the NATO summit. It was about the plans for Germany as a result of the NATO summit. And there are numbers like 2024, 2025. So we're talking about, until Germany is ready to play its part. Because again, the neglect is so big that you cannot change that in a short time.
So the Zeitenwende might not be as sincere as we had all thought it would be.
What many people say, yes. I mean, that they say, yeah, the Zeitenwende speech was great, and the 100 billion euro for the army is great. But I mean, some people said, okay, we're putting like 50 billion euro into the army every year, I think, and it doesn't work. Now we put some extra money, but maybe we should think about where we put the money and what are we doing with that? Because we're spending billions of euros for the military, and it still doesn't function. So maybe we have to look at the real problems, the underlying problems, the role of the soldiers, how their role in society, where we want to go, and take it from there, and then invest in something that works.
So changing the topic a little bit, you've been working in the media for a very long time. So I'm curious to understand how fragmented or divided the German media is in regard in regarding to Russia? For example, has the German media covered the statements by the Lithuanian prime minister about the risk from Russia before the war, and now her repeated comments that Russia has expanded the attacks on other countries? So is there a true reporting on Russia in Germany at this moment?
Yeah, true is a category that's a little difficult, but I would say that there is a lot of reporting. I mean, before the war, just up to the February 24th, I think I would say that most people in the media didn't expect Russia to invade, because we've been in this mood, in this state of mind for such a long time that yeah, Russia is difficult, Putin is difficult, and sometimes he just invades Crimea and things like that, but we can get along with him. We have common interests, mainly trade, mainly energy, but so we can get along. But after the war, I think many people, and also in the media, many journalists, yeah, changed their mind. There were some people that obviously shocked, also people and also politicians who before the war said, no, he'll never invade. I mean, I don't expect that. So, and they actually said, oh, I apologize, I have to change my mind. I can't tell exactly about other papers, other media. I think maybe there's a trend now because people are getting a little tired of the war and hearing news about the war. For example, I realized this morning listening to public radio, I think there was not one news about Ukraine. I mean, for quite some time, for weeks, it was number one. Each news program on the radio or television started with the war, the Russian war in Ukraine. Then it went down. Maybe it was like a number 3 or 4. And as I said this morning, I think it was not mentioned at all anymore. So, and there is a trend. I don't want to talk about the media in specifically because I can't really say where they stand. But what you can see from this open letters that you maybe heard of just recently was an open letter from self-proclaimed intellectuals. And the bottom line was someone said on Twitter, if you've never read it, the bottom line is, please leave us alone with your war. We don't want anything to do with that. We don't know what all this is about. We want peace. Not talking about what peace would mean for Ukraine. I mean, peace in quotation marks. And yeah, this is a trend you can see. There are some people who also say that this is the strategy of the German government. There's again in Poland talk about the long-term strategy or the midterm of the German government, that they don't really want the Ukraine to win. They say the reason might be that then if Ukraine really becomes part of Central Europe and a part of the EU, they would be a very strong country and Germany would lose influence. I don't know. This is like a Polish view, an expert from Poland. But there are many people who say that maybe the German government doesn't really want to support the Ukraine, so the country can win against Russia. So this is a trend I find very dangerous. As far as my paper, we're still reporting a lot. We have reporters there in Bakhmut, very close, like just a few kilometers from the front line, and reporting all the time because we think it's really terrible what's going on there. And yeah, we shouldn't forget about it.
Yeah, we're seeing similar here in the United States. The Ukraine war was front and center for several weeks, and now it's dropped down to probably 5 or 6 on the list. So in our final moments, I just wanted to kind of change the conversation. Scholz was put onto the world stage. How was he perceived by the German public?
Yeah, I mean, I told you this one episode that actually made quite some headlines, where he just was really rude to this journalist asking a question. I mean, later he talked about it in another on a talk show, and he said, no, there's no reason to apologize. And then he said, yeah, for security reasons, we cannot get into those guarantees for Ukraine. I understand that, but why can't he say that?
Mm-hmm.
And many people are really fed up with this style of his, because this is not the first time.
Mm-hmm.
People are asking questions, and the German people on the media and are asking questions, and they're not getting any answers. I mean, the weapons for Ukraine is one thing, but in many other issues as well. So yeah, I mean, overall, it was not everything went well in Elmau. I mean, he was a good host. Mm-hmm. And again, as I said, they produced a lot of nice pictures, and they were joking with Trudeau, and there were some really nice pictures. And I mean, the majority would agree that he played a good role. But I mean, and some people compared it to the other summit, where Merkel and Obama, and they said, yeah, I mean, there have been a lot of promises back then, mm-hmm. 2015, also climate-wise, like we have to change the climate politics, everything, and yeah, people just know that Scholz cannot, go the big steps anymore. This, he has so many problems at his hand that it's quite tough for him. But yeah, again, overall, I think he made a good, put on a good show there. The latest poll I've just found, the SPD, Olaf Scholz's party, in one poll, there's always different ones, but this latest poll, their popularity is 19%. That's not really that great. The Greens, 21. The FDP, and these three are in a coalition, 9.5. And the CDU, the biggest opposition party, is at 28%. And the AfD at 11. So the two biggest opposition parties, CDU and AfD, have like almost 40%. That doesn't really look like a very popular government. Mm-hmm. What's interesting when you talk the reception of Scholz, what a problem is for him is Robert Habeck, Secretary of Economy, mm-hmm. because he has a very different way to communicate. He is the most popular politician in Germany and he does little reels on Instagram and Twitter, and he just gets there, for example, in Qatar, and he says, okay, we need some gas now. I know Qatar is problematic. They have human rights violations, everything, but he stands there and he explains in just plain words what the situation is and what his plans are. He is really good in communication. Mm-hmm. Annalena Baerbock is not as visible right now. In the very beginning of the start, she was traveling a lot and everybody followed her, maybe waiting for some mistakes for her to make. She didn't. She stood up to Lavrov in Moscow, and these two are really quite popular. And if you see Scholz in contrast, who can't even talk one straight sentence sometimes, yeah, I don't think that, he's very popular, and we can see with the other guys how politics could be and how, what people think politics should be like, or communication in politics should be like.
Sure. Well, thank you, Jens, for joining us. I've enjoyed this conversation. I'm very sorry for the technical difficulties. On behalf of Steve, thank you for being part of this conversation. And I hope you can join us again in the future when we have a better internet connection.
Okay, if you see Steve, say hi to him.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much.